Thursday night. The air still carries the heat of the day. But something has changed. On the streets of Jerusalem, about 2,000 years ago, oil lamps flicker in the windows of stone houses. The smell of freshly baked bread and bitter herbs mixes with the dry wind blowing down from the hills. Somewhere in this ancient and noisy city, a group of 13 men climbs a narrow staircase toward an upper room. Simple, with clay walls and a long table in the center. You are not reading a distant account. You are there. You feel the weight of the silence that comes before something big. You sense that this night is not ordinary, even without fully understanding why. And it is precisely here that our story begins. Holy Thursday is celebrated every year by hundreds of millions of people around the world. Churches fill up, rituals are repeated, words are spoken in Latin, in Greek, in Portuguese, in Mandarin. But there is a question that almost no one asks, and that, when answered, completely changes the way you see this night. Why did the Last Supper take place specifically on a Thursday? And what was really happening at that dinner that most people never noticed? The answer goes far beyond religion. It involves politics, culture, astronomy, and one of the most intelligent communication strategies in human history. And the most surprising thing is that the clues are hidden in plain sight, within a ritual that billions of people still repeat today, without realizing what they are rediscovering. Before we get to the answer, you need to understand the context. You need to feel the ground beneath the feet of those men, because without that, the revelation loses half its impact. Jerusalem in the first century was not a peaceful city. It was an occupied territory. Roman soldiers patrolled the streets in iron armor that clinked against the uneven stones. The tension between Roman power and the Jewish population was constant, almost palpable, like a taut rope about to snap. And during that particular week, the tension was even greater. It was the week of the Jewish Passover, Pesach, one of the most important celebrations on the Hebrew calendar, which drew people to Jerusalem. Hundreds of thousands of pilgrims came from all regions of the known world. The city was overflowing. The inns were packed. The markets operated non-stop. The temple priests worked tirelessly, overseeing the sacrifices and ritual purifications. It was the time of greatest religious fervor and also of heightened political vigilance. The Roman authorities knew that agitated crowds could turn into uprisings. And it is exactly in this setting that you need to imagine Jesus and his 12 disciples arriving at that room. Simple men, most of them fishermen and craftsmen from the countryside of Galilee, with calloused hands and dusty sandals. Men who had left behind their nets, their businesses, and their families to follow someone who spoke in a way no one had ever spoken before. They did not know that night that they were about to take part in a meal that would be analyzed, painted, and sculpted, debated and celebrated for more than 2,000 years. But here is the first detail that most people overlook. That dinner was not a new invention. It was a ritual with centuries of history. It was the Seder, the Jewish Passover dinner, full of symbols, specific foods, and ritual questions. And Jesus, being Jewish, knew exactly what each element on that table meant. The unleavened bread, called matzah, represented the haste of the escape from Egypt when the Hebrews did not have time to let the bread rise. The bitter herbs recalled the bitterness of slavery. The wine, drunk in 4 different cups throughout the night, each with a distinct meaning, guided the participants through a journey of collective memory, from suffering to freedom. Every gesture at that table had a historical reference. And Jesus was about to reshape all of this in a way that no one expected. But before reaching that moment, there is something that needs to be said about the day of the week, because the choice of Thursday was not random. And understanding it is the key to everything that comes next. Have you ever stopped to think about how much timing matters? Not chronological time of hours and minutes, but symbolic time. The right moment, the instant when an action gains a meaning that no other time could offer. Holy Thursday is not Thursday by accident. And to understand this, you need to know something that very few people are aware of about the Jewish calendar of the first century. Passover, the Jewish Pesach, officially began at sunset on Friday. That the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed in the temple, that families would gather, and that the great ritual of collective memory would begin. This means that Thursday night, for the Jews of that time, was already technically the beginning of the next day. The Jewish day did not begin at midnight like ours does. It began at sunset. So when Jesus and his disciples gathered that Thursday night, they were, according to the Jewish calendar, at the boundary between 2 days, at the very threshold between the ordinary and the sacred, between the common and the extraordinary. And it is here that the story begins to reveal its first great hidden layer. There is a fascinating debate among Bible scholars. Historians and theologians have debated this for centuries. The Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke describe that meal as the actual Passover dinner, the full Seder. But the Gospel of John suggests that the supper took place a day before the official Passover, as if Jesus had intentionally anticipated the ritual. This difference of a single day may seem small, but it carries enormous significance. If John is correct, and many historians believe he is, then Jesus was not simply participating in Passover. He was creating a new version of it. He was taking a ritual with 1,200 years of history and rewriting its central meaning, not with doctrinal words or elaborate speeches, but with simple gestures around a table. Think about that for a moment. You want to transform the way an entire civilization understands things, right? Liberation, sacrifice, and collective memory. How do you do that? With an army? With a decree? With a book of philosophy? Or do you gather 13 people around a table, take the bread everyone already knows, break it in half, and say, from now on, this means something different? That supper was one of the most powerful acts of symbolic reinvention in human history. And it happened on a Thursday night precisely because timing mattered. Because being on the threshold, neither in nor out, neither before nor after, was the perfect position to inaugurate something new without completely breaking with what already existed. But there's more. Much more. There is a detail at that table that almost everyone completely overlooks, and which appears so clearly in the Gospels that it's hard to understand how it went unnoticed for so long. Jesus washed the disciples' feet. It seems like an act of humility, and it is. But in the cultural context of that time and place, it was also a radically subversive gesture. Washing feet was the task of slaves, not of teachers. Not of leaders, not of prophets, of slaves. And in that culture, rigidly hierarchical, where everyone knew exactly what their place was, in the social pyramid, a master kneeling before his disciples with a basin of water in his hands. He was making a statement that everyone in that room understood immediately. Peter, one of the disciples, refused. He said that it wasn't right, that he wouldn't allow it. And Jesus replied with a phrase that was recorded in the texts. If I do not wash you, you have no part with me. It was not a decorative gesture. It was a practical lesson about what that movement intended to be. It was the difference between power exercised over people and power exercised for the benefit of people. Communicated not with words, but with water. A basin and 2 knees bent on the stone floor. And then came the bread. At the meal, the traditional Passover, the matzah, the unleavened bread, was broken and distributed as a remembrance of the suffering of the ancestors in Egypt. It was a symbol oriented toward the past. Jesus took that same bread, broken in the same way it had been broken by generations and generations of Jewish families, and turned its meaning toward the future. No longer a remembrance of an ancient slavery. From that moment on, it became a memory of something that was about to happen. It was as if someone took an entire tradition in the palm of their hand and turned it 180 degrees, keeping its form, but reversing the direction of its gaze. The same thing happened with the wine. The fourth cup of the Seder, the cup of acceptance. The cup that concluded the ritual and sealed it. The covenant between God and the people was transformed that night into something that Christians would repeat on every continent, in every century that followed, in marble cathedrals and in clay chapels, in ceremonies broadcast live, and in masses celebrated in languages that did not even exist on that Thursday. And here we arrive at the heart of the revelation we promised at the beginning. What makes Holy Thursday so extraordinary? It's not just what happened in that room. It's the fact that what happened in that room was meant to be remembered actively, not passively. Jesus did not tell a story to be heard. He created a ritual to be repeated. He explicitly said, "Do this in memory of me." Scholars of collective memory, such as the French historian Paul Connaughton, show that human societies preserve their most important memories, not in books, but in repeated bodily practices, in gestures, in rituals that the body learns and reproduces, almost without thinking. That's why you remember how to ride a bicycle, even if you haven't pedaled in years. That's why a song from your childhood can make you cry, decades later. Jesus, on that Thursday, did not just create a theology. He created a technology of memory, a mechanism of cultural transmission so efficient that it has survived wars, persecutions, divisions, reforms, and revolutions for more than 2,000 years. And even today, it is repeated weekly by more than 1 billion people around the world. This is human and symbolic intelligence operating at the highest level. But there is still another dimension to that night, one that is rarely mentioned and that completely changes the way you feel the weight of those hours. A dimension that has to do not with symbols or rituals, but with something much simpler and much more human: betrayal. Have you ever been in a room surrounded by people you completely trusted and yet felt that something was wrong? That subtle and uncomfortable feeling that appearances did not match reality. That beneath the smiles and the right words, there was something you couldn't quite name. Jesus felt that on that night. The Gospels record a moment that happened during the supper with almost cinematic precision. Jesus looked at the men around the table, men with whom he had walked dusty roads, crossed storms on the Sea of Galilee, shared meals in humble homes for 3 whole years, and said in a low voice that one of them would betray him before dawn. The silence that must have fallen over that room is impossible to fully describe. The disciples began to look at one another. Each one asked with gestures or with words if he was the traitor. Not because they were naive, but because the question about one's own loyalty, when spoken aloud, has the power to shake even the most steadfast of men. Judas was sitting at that table. He ate the same bread. He drank the same wine. And he knew what he had arranged with the temple priests for 30 pieces of silver. An amount that, according to historians, was roughly equivalent to the value of a slave in the market at that time. It was not a fortune. It was a low price for an act that would forever shape the course of Western history. But here is the detail that most narratives overlook. Jesus knew, and even knowing, he did not stop it. He did not angrily expel Judas from the room. He did not call the other disciples to restrain him. According to John's account, he even told Judas himself, in a veiled way, to do what he had to do, and to do it quickly. As if that betrayal were not just a crime to be avoided, but a piece within something greater, which needed to happen for the rest of the story to be completed. This is not romanticism, nor is it the glorification of suffering. It is something much more disturbing and much more human than that. It is the portrait of someone who understood that certain choices, even the most painful ones, cannot be made by someone else. That the freedom to act, even to act wrongly, is an inseparable part of what it means to be human. And it is here that the narrative of Holy Thursday ceases to be just a religious story and becomes something that concerns anyone at any time. Because all of us have already been at that table. Not literally, but in the sense that matters. All of us have shared bread with someone who later disappointed us. We have trusted someone who chose a different path. We have sat beside people who, deep down, had already made decisions that would change everything. And most of us did not know how to deal with it with the same wholeness that scene records. After Judas left, the night went on. The wine was shared, the words were spoken, and then the group went down the stairs, crossed the streets of Jerusalem, illuminated by the full moon of Passover, and went to a garden called Gethsemane, on the other side of the Kidron Valley, at the foot of the Mount of Olives. And there, among the ancient olive trees and the cold ground of the night, it happened, something that painters rarely paint, and preachers rarely emphasize with the strength it deserves. Jesus asked for it not to happen. He was not a marble hero, unmoved in the face of his own fate. He was a man with his knees on the ground, sweating in anguish, asking for the weight of that moment to be taken from him. The Gospels use words that describe real agony. Physical tension, the kind of fear that has no name, but that any human being who has ever waited for something inevitable and terrible knows all too well. This matters. It matters because it strips away any layer of invulnerability from the story and puts it back where it always belonged, in the realm of human experience. In the zone where courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to go on despite it. And then the soldiers arrived, and Judas, he came with them, and that Thursday night ended in the only way a night of such weight could end, with the end of an era and the beginning of another. What happened in the days that followed is well known, but what happened in that room, at that table, on that Thursday night, remained alive in a way that very few moments in history have managed to endure. It stayed alive in the breaking of bread every week, in thousands of churches, on every continent. It stayed alive in the act of washing feet, which religious orders repeat with real water and real knees. To this day, it stayed alive in paintings, the most famous of which is Leonardo da Vinci's, who spent more than 3 years working on that image in the refectory of a convent in Milan, trying to capture in paint and pigment the exact moment when Jesus announced the betrayal, and the face of each man around the table responded in a different way. It stayed alive, above all, because that night taught something that transcends any religious or cultural boundary. That the most important moments in human life rarely arrive with fanfare. They come on a Thursday night in a simple room with ordinary bread and common wine. They arrive in the midst of conversations between ordinary people who do not yet know they are taking part in something that will be remembered forever. They arrive at the threshold, in that space between what was and what is about to be. And they arrive with a question that never loses its power. What do you do with the time you have, with the people around you, and with the symbols you inherit? Holy Thursday is not just a date on the Christian calendar. It is a mirror. And when you look at it closely enough, you don't just see 13 men around an ancient table. You see the structure of every important human choice, the awareness of what is to come, the freedom to act even so, and the decision to leave something that lasts longer than you do. That is what was hidden that night. Not a dark secret, not an encrypted mystery, but the profound intelligence of someone who understood that the best way to change the future is to create a ritual so simple and so powerful that people keep repeating it century after century, until the meaning lives within them, even before it is explained. And it worked. 2,000 years later, you are here, thinking about that Thursday night. If this video made you see Holy Thursday with new eyes, leave your comment down below. We really want to know what you thought and what you already knew about that night. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button now. That really helps the channel keep bringing stories like this one. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because every week there's a new video waiting for you. And speaking of which, you need to watch the next video about the hidden symbols in Holy Week. Most people go their whole lives without ever noticing them. It's right here on the screen waiting for you.